When BJ lost her 2 dogs, she was afraid she would never find them again. When one of them came back exhibiting a strange behavior, she decided to follow her into the forest and was left heartbroken by the sight she was faced with. BJ was a young woman who lived on Fashion Island, Washington, and loved dogs very much. She had 2 beautiful puppies named Tilly and Phoebe. The dogs were inseparable, in spite of how different they were in so many ways. For one, Tilly was an 11-year-old Irish setter and spaniel mix who was adopted as a puppy. She was a gentle dog whose hobbies mostly included chasing tennis balls and cuddling in her owner's lap. She always obeyed BJ's orders and never got into trouble. In simple words, Tilly was a very good girl. Phoebe, on the other hand, was nearly the opposite of Tilly and always managed to get her into trouble. Phoebe was a 4-year-old basset hound who was adopted when she was 2 years old. BJ had seen how the two hit it off at a doggy daycare and decided to adopt her right away. While Tilly did not mind playing indoors all day, Phoebe had a sharp nose that seemed to sniff out everything, including a lot of trouble. The dog had a nose and the will to sniff out any good or bad smell, not minding if it was beyond their allowed boundaries. She was a curious little explorer, and while this is normally a good sign for young dogs, her curiosity would soon put her in a dangerous situation. One September, BJ held a garden party with her friends. While she was entertaining guests, her 2 dogs were also having fun outside the house. While they were playing in the garden, they noticed that someone had left the gate open. Guests were coming in and out freely, and one of them must have forgotten to lock it up. Phoebe saw this as an opportunity to explore like she always wanted to, and she quickly ran out of the gate. If Tilly had been in charge, they would not have left the house even though the gate was open. However, being a devoted companion of her best friend, she was left with no choice but to follow Phoebe. The 2 delinquents made their way out of the gate and ran off to play. Meanwhile, BJ was oblivious to the fact that the dogs had run away. To her knowledge, they were just playing in the garden. After some minutes, she noticed that they were not in sight, but she assumed they would come back after some time. To the dog owner's greatest surprise, by late evening that night, her beloved pups had not yet returned home. As time passed, BJ became increasingly worried and informed some of her neighbors about the latest development. When the pups failed to return the next day, she knew that she had to file a missing report. Following a friend's advice, she contacted Vashon Island Pet Protectors, also called VIPP. VIPP is a non-profit organization based on Vashon Island in the state of Washington, USA, that is dedicated to helping animals in need by providing them with shelter and medical care and finding them loving forever homes. She and her friends also spread the word about the missing animals on the island using social media. As the days progressed, the search continued. But just a few sightings. There was an encounter near Old Mill Road, a sighting by Judd Creek, and a call-in from Reading Speech. One person commented that when she saw the playful duo, they looked as if they knew where they were going, so she didn't think that they were lost. BJ intensified search efforts and put up flyers with pictures of the missing dogs everywhere on the island. It had been almost a week since the duo went missing, and the islanders involved in the search seemed to resign to the fact that the situation was not looking good for the beloved Phoebe and Tilly. Amy Carey, a VIPP volunteer, was, however, of the opinion that the 2 animals were likely trapped, maybe in a shed, a barn, or a ravine, or even worse, an abandoned well. She had been through scenarios like this before, and they had ended up finding the animals in the weirdest locations. One day, BJ got a call from Amy that gave her a glimmer of hope. The organization had received a call from a community member about a reddish dog matching Tilly's description, who had been coming up to them while they were out on their property and then promptly heading back into a forest. The 2 women raced to the location with their hearts pounding as they dared to hope one more time for good news. On getting there, they met a farmer and his wife, who told them an interesting little story. Anytime the farmer and his wife were out on their property, the dog would come to them, but not get too close, and then head back into the forest once she was sure she had their attention. The couple always wondered about the dog's strange behavior, but never thought to do anything about it until they came across a missing flyer and called the number on it. BJ and Amy did not know what to think at this point. They hoped with all their heart that the dog turned out to be Tilly. The farmer had informed them that the dog visited the property every evening, so they decided to wait until the dog came. The hopeful woman spent the next few hours waiting anxiously for the dog to show up. As time passed, the initial hope they felt began to give way to a dreadful thought that the pup might not show up. Just as the women were about to give up, they heard something rustling in the bushes close by and finally heard that sweet sound they had been waiting for all week. A small one. Woof response when they called out the name Tilly. The basset hound emerged from behind the small thicket, with her tail wagging quickly as she barked excitedly. BJ, however, was taken aback when the dog did not run toward her but took a step back when she tried to go closer. She could not comprehend the dog's behavior. Tilly was obviously happy to see her, but would just not come to her. The dog barked again and then ran off into the forest. Not knowing what to do, the perplexed woman followed the dog. It was obvious that she wanted them to, because she kept stopping and turning back to see if they were actually following her. After trailing the pup for what seemed to be hours, the basset hound stopped abruptly beside an old cistern. Tilly then did something totally unexpected. She lay there with her head resting on the concrete wall. BJ took a step forward, and thankfully, this time, the dog did not move away. It seemed like she wanted her to come over. BJ looked back at Amy and then walked toward the dog. What she discovered next will break your heart, just as it broke hers. A tired Phoebe was perched on some concrete rubble that held her out of the water in the cistern. BJ choked back a tear as she saw her poor baby looking scared and exhausted. Phoebe let out a lively bark when she saw her owner, and little Tilly started jumping up and down in excitement. Help had arrived. Apparently, Phoebe couldn't climb out of the system because the side walls were too tall for her, and she had been stuck there for nearly a week. Tilly, her best friend and loyal companion, had stayed by her side with the exception of the few minutes each day when she went out for help. The two dogs must have been hungry and exhausted, but Tilly had not left her friend's side at all. Everyone was impressed by the dog's loyalty and praised her with treats and belly rubs. Amy called for backup, and soon there were skilled hands trying to bring the dog out of the cistern, and both of them were reunited with their owner amidst tears and hugs, and a lot of tail wagging. Everyone who watched this emotional display held back tears at their reunion. BJ and her dogs returned home and celebrated with extra hamburgers and pot roast. Before long, the dogs were jumping around like they had never been through such a hard ordeal. They were just glad to be home. After playing and eating to their satisfaction, they soon fell fast asleep. Exhausted from the events of the week, BJ watched them as they slept, grateful to have them back, but also for their loyalty toward each other.